Hello and welcome to PeopleSoft or PeopleSaaS presented by Rob Townsend from MoTown Group. We're thankful that you guys joined us today for the PeopleSoft Innovation Summit. My name is Joseph Baringhouse, the Senior Field Marketing Coordinator for Apcian, and I'd like to thank you guys for your participation today. I just wanted to give you a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Everyone is on mute. The session's being recorded and we will post them on the registration landing page for free on demand within the next week, so be on the lookout for that email. The session today will be 45 minutes, so we'll have a very limited time for Q&A. If you have a question for the presenter, I would encourage you to reach out to them directly. Rob will give you his email at the end. Or if you have any questions for the webinar admin, you can put them in the question section of the control panel. You can also put your questions in the control panel as well for Rob, and we'll make sure he gets those too. With that being said, I'd like to turn things over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Joseph. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. Just want to say, hey, thanks for your time today. I'm really excited about talking with you all. As Joseph mentioned, my name is Rob Townsend, and I'm the co-founder and managing partner of the MoTown Group. Today, we're going to talk about just the tips and techniques for how you can use a multitude of features and functionalities that are available today in PeopleSoft for keeping your system fresh, modern, updated, and really on pace with some of the software as a service offerings we're seeing in the market today. Today's talk is really about taking a step back, giving your on-premise software a good look and address some of the older and dated features that may be lingering. Before we get into it, let's just do a brief introduction. Sorry. So as I mentioned, my name is Rob Townsend. I have 20 years of PeopleSoft and ERP experience. Really been in the consulting world for the majority of my career. Got started in PeopleSoft in 1997. I worked in the PeopleSoft consulting organization for a number of years, and then eventually went out on my own as an independent consultant. One of the recurring themes I found while in the consulting world was that, clients often struggled with, hiring strong PeopleSoft talent, keeping them motivated, keep them challenged, keeping them well paid. And as we all know, the PeopleSoft skill set has historically been a pretty high price tag for employers, all the while being a back office system and generally not a source of revenue. And so in 2010, I co-founded a consulting organization with my business partner, Justin Moeller. We creatively came up with the name, the Moeller-Townsend Group, but soon realized that this is a little bit of a mouthful, so we condensed it to the MoTown Group. No, we're not based in Detroit. We get that all the time, although we ain't too proud to beg at times. And while, we agree MoTown is a little bit sticky, it's memorable, and people seem to resonate with it, so we're going to stick with it. The cornerstone of our business has been what we call PeopleSoft as a Service, or PSaaS. Kind of the origins of our business, we've always started with the managed services angle more so than the project-based services. So PeopleSoft the Service, or PSaaS, we've developed is very much inconsistent with the topics we're going to be covering today, which is how to run your PeopleSoft system using modern and SaaS-like principles to gain efficiencies, cost savings, reduce your technical debt, and ultimately extend the longevity of your PeopleSoft environment. These are things that you can do yourself, principles you can instill and follow yourself, or we're certainly happy to talk with you about how we can help manage and improve the efficiencies of your PeopleSoft environment as well. To take a step back before we get into the meat of the discussion, I just want to articulate why I feel this conversation is important for the Oracle and the PeopleSoft community. What's the point of comparing PeopleSoft, arguably a 40-year-old software system, to a modern software as a service application? And I think the reason is that the PeopleSoft product development team has really done a pretty amazing job over the years with keeping a system, again, whose roots date back to the 1980s, keeping it relevant, modern, and timeless. As most of you know, PeopleSoft is built on a metadata architecture, which makes it adaptable to new technologies. And it's this metadata architecture that allowed PeopleSoft to go from a client-server, fat client-based model in 1990 to a web-based system, and then reinvented again recently with a move to fluid and a responsive web design. Without this metadata-driven architecture, the product wouldn't be able to evolve as quickly as it can. And while the PeopleSoft product development team continues to innovate, the marketing reach of PeopleSoft has obviously been declining. Because of this, it can be difficult to get consistent information into the hands of and minds of our clients, and specifically the IT decision makers that we work with. There isn't necessarily an Oracle account rep who's knocking on doors, pitching the merits of PeopleSoft. And this leads to confusion within the community, or maybe even a lack of what the product can do or product knowledge within our clients. So today we're going to talk about a number of different features and innovations that has kept PeopleSoft modern and up to date in this changing world. Some of these features you may be aware of, and this conversation can be somewhat redundant. Some of these you may be using in your production system already, while others you may have heard of but haven't really explored or utilized. But hopefully along the way you'll develop some nuggets, maybe kind of rethink about how you can view and implement your PeopleSoft system. So as we all know, there's really been a fundamental shift from on-premise applications to software over service or SaaS-based systems in the last 5 to 7 years or so. This is a similar shift we saw in the 1990s with clients moving from mainframe to client server-based systems. There are a number of market forces that have created this change and really extend beyond what we have time to cover today. But it's clear that the future of ERP applications is and will be in the cloud and not on-premise. There's really no denying that. At this point in time, most of our clients have evaluated a move to the cloud and generally considered the likes of Workday or Oracle Cloud Apps as potential suitors to an on-premise PeopleSoft application. Some clients have moved off of PeopleSoft. Others have decided to stay for a while. But regardless, what are some of the decisions as to why clients are deciding to move to SaaS or to stay on PeopleSoft? Is the grass always greener on the other side? So, obviously one of the main things you achieve with a modern SaaS experience is just a modern UI and user experience, and primarily with mobile capabilities. If you've seen Workday, if you've seen Oracle Cloud demos, the first thing that stands out is the UI, the user experience. Very clean, very sleek, very modern. Additionally, having those full mobile capabilities across the entire application is very compelling. It's not just a plugin, it's not just an afterthought, it really is a mobile-first strategy. We also see a lot of clients that are attracted to having an opportunity to really streamline their business processes in a SaaS-based system. They view the SaaS implementation as a chance to kind of reboot or retool their business processes. By nature, the implementation of a SaaS system forces a client to take a hard look at all their business processes. These applications are very flexible in the way they can be configured around business processes, and specifically without the need to customize. Additionally, reducing technical debt is a big one for what we see as in the IT executive level. There's no more servers to manage. There's no more licenses to cobble together. There's one payment to one vendor once a year, and you're done. And that's very attractive from a budgeting standpoint, as well as an overall technical debt standpoint. We're also seeing, obviously, that SaaS-based systems, they're vendor-supported, automatic and continuous updates come out on a periodic basis, very predictable basis. This isn't the responsibility of the client, although testing and business process validation still remains at the client level. The application itself is updated by the vendor itself. While some clients have claimed to see cost savings when they move to a SaaS-based model, what we've generally seen is that these are necessarily soft costs, not really hard cost estimates. In fact, I haven't really seen any models that validate a SaaS-based system versus on-premise PeopleSoft is actually a hard dollar cost savings. But as part of the conversation, a lot of times cost savings will start the conversation, but not necessarily finish the conversation. And then, a little bit harsh, but, we do see a lot of misleading sales and marketing out in the community. I can't, count the number of times we've heard PeopleSoft is dead from the sales force. And it's just the nature of the marketing process that we're working with. So, what are the reasons to stay with PeopleSoft? So for the clients that have evaluated SaaS and decided to stay with PeopleSoft, what are the reasons that drove this decision? Obviously, CapEx, OpEx reasons can shape the decision. Moving to the cloud is a multi-million-dollar investment in implementation fees and then annual SaaS fees. Ultimately, going back to the cost savings we talked about, we're finding that clients find it cheaper in the long term and the short term to stay with PeopleSoft. PeopleSoft has been out for a while. It is very feature rich. There's deep functionality across industry specific industries. And also the fact that you have the ability to customize PeopleSoft is a benefit for some niche business processes. In the SaaS world, there just isn't the opportunity to customize, and the product features just aren't quite as deep yet. Additionally, a lot of people have an existing support team in place. They necessarily don't want to upset the apple cart. Going to a SaaS model requires a lot of change management in terms of technical skill set as well as business process skill set, and some clients just don't have the capacity to take that on. And of course, nobody wants to leave PeopleSoft because we love our COBOL, right? Everybody loves tuning COBOL statements. No, seriously, COBOL is not one of the reasons anybody's staying on PeopleSoft. A SaaS move, as I mentioned before, can be too disruptive or just may not be a strategic priority for some clients. Some clients have other revenue generating initiatives that take precedence over moving to a SaaS-based system. So, ultimately, PeopleSoft is working for them. And for the clients that we see where PeopleSoft is working for them, we generally see that they have adopted a lot of the same principles that we're gonna cover in the following slides. So, the main reason we're here today is because we're all looking to maximize the longevity out of our PeopleSoft system and achieve the most benefits as we can. To achieve this, we really need to start rethinking and retooling about how we install, configure, and manage our PeopleSoft environments. This is really more important than ever. If we want our PeopleSoft systems to be relevant in a useful and modern world, we need to view our PeopleSoft systems as a modern investment and treat it with the same principles as a SaaS-based system. Over the past few years, the PeopleSoft development team has invested heavily in areas that allow PeopleSoft to compete with SaaS-based systems. These investments have been delivered in spurts, and it's often easy to overlook the new features, the functionality, and tool sets that are available at our disposal with each new release. But when you combine them together, you're almost amazed at how PeopleSoft can compete with the benefits of SaaS, SaaS-like functionality. While I'm not here to say that PeopleSoft is a like-for-like replacement for a SaaS-based system, what I am saying is that putting together the features and functionality at your disposal, you can almost reform your PeopleSoft environment to look and feel and operate in a SaaS-like fashion. And that's specifically what we call PeopleSaaS. There are three main building blocks or tenets, to use a SaaS term, in a PeopleSoft system, and those are infrastructure, user experience, and application management. And we're going to cover each of these different tenets in detail. From the first tenet of a PeopleSoft is obviously the infrastructure layer. And within infrastructure itself, we kind of view there as being three components to focus on from an infrastructure standpoint. These are the hardware itself, what your system is running on, being mobile ready, mobile capable, and then utilizing the PeopleSoft Cloud Manager as it fits within your footprint. From a hardware standpoint, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about hardware because for most people, this decision has already been made. But it is important that we are running on modern infrastructure. A lot of clients have, through larger corporate initiatives, have already moved to maybe Amazon Web Services, Azure, third-party data centers. We just don't see a lot of clients actually hosting their own hardware anymore. It's just, again, PeopleSoft was part of a larger corporate initiative. We are seeing a lot of movement to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. It's becoming a major factor in the market. And as you see with each PeopleTools release, there kind of becomes a stronger and stronger bond between PeopleTools itself and the OCI. And even more when you lay in PeopleSoft Cloud Manager for instance management. We're really starting to see a lot of clients actually consider OCI for their infrastructure needs, both production and development. And in terms of being a good steward of your system, it's good that you keep a pulse on where OCI is going as it relates to PeopleSoft. The evolution is becoming more and more compelling with each release. Specific features like database as a service, autonomous databases are really starting to poke their head out in the PeopleSoft world, and it's going to be fascinating to see where these fit within the overall PeopleSoft stack as we move forward. So beyond the infrastructure itself, it's absolutely critical. We can't have a conversation about being a modern SaaS-based system without including mobile capabilities. One of the key components of a SaaS system is it must be mobile. This is simply a given. However, we do still run into clients that are limited in their ability to deploy mobile because they are reluctant to allow access to PeopleSoft from a mobile device or even outside their network. And this just creates a huge limitation in terms of progress. We see clients that haven't really been able to open up even basic self-service functionality or approval functionality because of firewall restrictions or access outside of a corporate network has been prohibited. And as I mentioned, from a PeopleSoft modernization standpoint, this is really a non-starter. We've got to get past the ability of opening up PeopleSoft outside the network and making it mobile friendly. So it's important that if this is a barrier in your current organization, it's important that we really stress test this. We found instances where we can get creative with security, where maybe only a select feature set are available within PeopleSoft from the internet versus the intranet. So maybe an HR manager can complete basic self-service functionality from the internet, but then when they log back into the corporate network, they have full access. To give Appsian a plug, they also obviously have a lot of good multi-factor authentication tools, security tools that can be layered on top of PeopleSoft to make that that security as robust and reliable as possible. There's also VPN protocols that can be deployed that can be utilized to complete that handshake and make that secure as well. So in short, don't let the conversation stop with regards to mobile access, purely due to mobile and internet-based access limitations. There's ways we can work around this. And so finally, from an infrastructure standpoint, the PeopleSoft Cloud Manager has been a pretty amazing evolution from an instance management standpoint. With Cloud Manager, you can now deploy new PUM instances, which is really great for quickly and effectively managing a new PUM instance or PeopleTools release. Also, new PeopleTools releases are continuing to be released on Cloud Manager before their generally their GA date, which makes really gives you an early peek into any new tools or features or functionality that you may want to try out from a PeopleTools standpoint. And again, as I mentioned before, the closer and closer that PeopleTools and OCI become tied, the more and more relevant and practical the PeopleSoft Cloud Manager is going to become as we move forward. So, having addressed the infrastructure issues, the next layer in a tenant and a PSaaS system, PeopleSaaS system, is really to address the fun part, which is the user experience. And the user experience is really where the rubber hits the road when you're looking to modernize your PeopleSoft system. So from a user experience, there are really three main components you need to take into account. First of all, your user experience needs to be modern. You need to have a modern UI, whether that's fluid. You also need to account for navigation. There's been a fairly major paradigm shift from a navigational standpoint that's often overlooked. And then analytics. Analytics is one of the main attractions from a software as a service standpoint, where your analytics and your transactional data reside side by side. So let's dig into each of those a little bit. For starters, take a step back and really look at your PeopleSoft system from the eyes of an end user, and not the end user that's been looking at the same PeopleSoft pages and components for years, but from the eyes of, say, a new hire that has to enroll in benefits, or maybe an executive that has to approve a workflow transaction. And what we find consistently is that a lot of clients suffer from what we call the Hollywood effect. The Hollywood effect is when a user signs in, they see a really nice homepage, modern look and feel, everything's moving along pretty well. Maybe the homepage has a really cool background that's representative of, say, a company headquarters or company mission. And then finally, they go to navigate to a page, and like they're transported back 10 years to this, crude PeopleSoft 9.1 looking HTML-based screen. And for a user who's not used to PeopleSoft, it's a fairly drastic change to go from this beautiful homepage to suddenly, some basic HTML. So we call it the Hollywood effect because it's kind of like Hollywood movie set where, there's a stately mansion and it looks great in front of the camera, but then as soon as you take a peek around the corner, you realize that stately mansion is just some plywood and 2x4s holding it up. So you really need to look at your PeopleSoft environment and the UI from that user, the end user standpoint that doesn't have a day-to-day interaction with PeopleSoft. And really the solution to this is fluid adoption. Fluid adoption in Classic Plus is really critical to develop that seamless user experience from a classical world to a modern world. And I mean really adopt fluid in Classic, not just a handful of screens that are common across the self-service areas and the rest of it looks dated. I mean, really adopting fluid across the entire application. As we all know, Fluid is responsive to form factor. It looks and feels like a modern application that really changes the overall user experience for a user. So along the same lines of the user experience is, take a look at your approval workflow. A lot of clients are still using a mix of legacy workflow and AWE. AWE is such a better user experience, so much more user intuitive than the classic workflow. To make this change, it takes some time. You've got to reconfigure your legacy workflow into AWE. It's not a huge lift because really your business requirements are already there, but it does take some time. But at the end of this, you do have a consistent approval platform for all of your transactions. You have a consistent user experience of how to approve a transaction, regardless of what the transaction is. And while you're at it, once you've evaluated the AWE, go ahead and enable HTML-based workflow approvals. That way managers, can approve workflow transactions directly via their email. They'll love you for this. And then also in Tools 858, you can now have text messaging-based notifications, which again is pretty cool. So, kind of moving down the UI checklist, have you evaluated branding? And I take the screenshot courtesy of CY2 because I think it does a really nice job of just showing how you can really make PeopleSoft look and feel like an extension of your own corporate systems. A lot of times we see there's just a basic logo up in the top-hand corner, but really adopting the features and functionality within branding can transform that user experience. Specifically, take a look at theme builder macro sets that have come out. This can just take a PeopleSoft site and really make it tailored to a specific company or institution. So as we, with Fluid, with the approvals, with the branding, we've kind of accomplished the basics of the UI. But one of the more underappreciated parts of a modern ERP is the navigation. Navigation isn't a sexy topic, but it is a key attribute to think of from a user experience. As part of a modern UX or UI, there needs to be multiple ways of navigating to an application. If you think about your iPhone, you pick up your iPhone to access an application. You can either, press the icon itself. You can do a search for that particular application. You can call it up via Siri. You can also toggle from one application to another, maybe going from mail to a browser and then back. And really, PeopleSoft should be the same. The days of a linear process for navigating within nested menus and what you're looking for are really over. And when navigation is not implemented properly, it can really be very confusing to PeopleSoft users. For example, I think we're all used to building a new component for the business, add it to an existing menu that's nested way down a series of other menus, then telling them where that is. Maybe we even document it and we're done. But what happens is that what has happened is PeopleSoft really started to change the navigation paradigm, and by creating things like homepage, dashboards, navigation collections, fluid work centers, related actions, activity guides. I mean, basically what these are tools for navigation when you break them down to their essence. It's about reducing the number of clicks, making the system as user-friendly. And then what happens is when users get into kind of a two-part system where they're almost using two different types of navigational techniques, it becomes confusing. So it's really critical that we adopt these new navigational paradigms. If you're a client who still uses breadcrumbs at the top of the page, then this is a good tell that you haven't necessarily adopted that new navigational paradigms. So, these items should really be in your toolkit for anything and everything that you build and deploy in PeopleSoft. We also find that a lot of customers haven't really developed a level of comfort with the portal. This new navigation is really addressed at the portal level. The overall execution of layering more complex navigations is all based on the portal. And quite honestly, I understand why there's some confusion. It was confusing for us, even as a consulting organization, to adopt these new navigational paradigms. But it's really critical that you do this. So look at related actions. Maybe add your custom items to related actions. Look at navigation collections. Can your users effectively complete their entire business process all from one navigation collection, or are they still having to sort through the menu itself? It's really worth taking a hard look at that. And the good thing is, if you do get kind of lost on how to implement this, there's countless examples. The delivered product has examples of all of these, and so you've got some baseline to move forward with. So finally, one of the most, as I mentioned, one of the modern features of a SaaS system or user experience is tackling the embedded analytics side of this. Embedded analytics is really about having analytics and transactional data live side by side. In a SaaS system, no longer are transactions captured in one system, analytics reported from another system that was refreshed 24 hours ago. Analytics and transactions are happening side by side. So, to compete in this space, PeopleSoft has developed pivot grids. They've been out for a long time. Pivot grids can be layered into work centers and the related information panel on a fluid component. And this adds a very useful analytical view of data set alongside of individual transactions. Users get pretty excited when they see these pivot grids. I mean, look at the demo, and it really shows well. And to kind of challenge you, like, have you sat down with your users and identified, what are their key performance indicators that they want to see when logging into their PeopleSoft homepage? Maybe there's an executive dashboard that can be built to show real-time data that's relevant to the senior at a leadership level. And lastly, along the same lines, what about building some alerts, notifications that can be triggered automatically when certain thresholds are exceeded? That's pretty cool stuff. Along the same lines with pivot grids, I think we've all seen some of the the recent press, but Cabana is a new feature that has been released. And although this feature set does overlap with pivot grids, it's really going to be an amazing tool set to add into the PeopleSoft system. And what I think is so as you go through your 858 upgrades, be sure to include Cabana as a rollout, a part of that. It's really going to be transformative in terms of how we view analytical data alongside transactional data. And finally, let's talk a little bit about Elasticsearch. And I'll kind of lump Elasticsearch and Cabana into a similar comment, and that's, I think both of these exemplify how PeopleSoft has been able to incorporate, really modern technologies into the base product. Generally, we see Elastic being used for navigational purposes. You want to be able to type in where's process monitor, and Elasticsearch will show you where that is without having to navigate. But I think there's also a lot of missed opportunity when you expand the Elasticsearch into your transactional data elements. So Elasticsearch, have you created custom indexes on data that's important for your organization? Have you really explored where Elasticsearch can be used across the other all parts of the organization, all parts of the transactional data? It really is a pretty feature-rich tool. So as we're working through the main tenets of PSaaS or PeopleSaaS, the last piece of the pie is how you manage your application. We've solved for infrastructure gaps. We've implemented a modern UI user experience that keeps our users happy and productive. And it's now time to take a step and think about how your application management practices are, and ensure that your team and you are able to efficiently manage the application. Can you quickly apply PUM updates, uptake new features and functionality that are critical to your business users? And this requires a strong application management philosophy and a commitment to this philosophy. The three main components of an application management strategy are, your PUM update, how are you handling PUM updates, how you're handling customizations, what we call these smart customizations, and then have you implemented the automated testing PTF? So at MoTown, as part of our PSaaS offering, we work with our customers to establish a cyclical, scheduled, predictable PUM update strategy. As part of the PSaaS, we typically include an annual People Tools upgrade, 2 feature updates, and then 4 or 5 legislative regulatory updates, just depending on the release cycle. But in order to accomplish this, it's absolutely critical that you can be nimble, that you can apply these updates with the least disruption to your users as possible. With each PUM, you should be aware of what's included in each release, both from a functional, a technical standpoint. Use the CFO tool to evaluate where you are today against what the new image is going to be issuing. Use PeopleSoft Cloud Manager to deploy the latest image in advance, evaluate what features are there, what's going to work for your environment, what's not. And also, work with your team to create a PUM update calendar. This cadence should be on an annual basis that is, aligned with your business users, with your IT users. And it's important that everyone is aware of what this PUM update strategy is going to be so they can, align their calendars accordingly. So, as we discussed, one of the key tenets is to be able to keep a, application management philosophy and keep a schedule and apply updates on a predictable and consistent basis. But one of the things that can derail a project is the overall level of customization. The more customization you have in your environment, the more risk you're going to be introducing to those projects. Customization retrofits are expensive, they're time consuming, and generally one of the main variables as it relates to applying updates. So over the years, PeopleSoft has really developed a multitude of features that we call smart customizations at MoTown to help eliminate those pesky inline customizations. And by inline, I'm referring to those where you've delivered the delivered code, page, app engine, et cetera, has been modified. These are the guys that really come back and bite you. How many times over the years have you changed that same label from delivered to your custom version? Or how many times have you retrofitted that same record to add a custom field and then have to adjust all the related sequels? But with using smart customizations, or really these are, call them system configurations, you can make the change once and not affect the delivered code. And then future updates, you're simply completing a validation exercise rather than having to go through the whole recoding effort. In short, by now you should be very comfortable with using event mapping for people code customization. If you haven't explored this, give it a try. You'll be amazed at how customizations can be layered into the system without impacting delivered code. There's a tremendous amount of resources available on event mapping, whether it be online guides, YouTube videos. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already. Additionally, drop zones continue to be a pivotal feature. Originally, drop zones were available for fluid pages. Drop zones allow you to add your own custom fields. So instead of having to modify a delivered page, you can now add these to the drop zones, and then the custom fields will render themselves through the UI. Drop zones are now becoming available in non-fluid pages as well, which is fantastic. That will be continued to be rolled out as we go through future PUM updates. So keep an eye on that. Another tool that's probably a little underutilized is the page field configurator. This is a tool that you can use to hide fields, relabel fields. You can hide tabs. You can make fields display only, change default values. It's really an excellent tool set that's worth your time to even go back and retool some of those pesky customizations using the components of the field configurator. And finally, there's just no way around it. Sometimes we have to complete customizations. And this is one of the key benefits of even having PeopleSoft in the first place. As we know, it is a very configurable system. It's a very customizable system. But when a customization can't be avoided, it's critically important that these customizations are built with upgradability in mind. Whether it's using kind of a combination of these smart customizations, as we just discussed, or traditional development methods, it's just important that as you're building in PeopleSoft, that you're apprised of the impacts that's going to be made to the delivered code, and therefore your PUM update strategy. And then really, the concept of evaluating your customizations really never ends. This should be an ongoing effort. Every time you're retrofitting a customization, you should be evaluating, is this something I need to move forward? Is this something that can be retired? From a business process standpoint, is it no longer critical to my business? But then also, can I rethink how I'm deploying this from a technical standpoint? Is there a smart customization that can be used instead of a direct customization. And with each People Tools release, there continues to be more and more features available for reducing that customization footprint. An example that came out in 8.5.8 is the App Engine customization plugin. Essentially, this is kind of like the event mapping for App Engine programs, where you can replace a delivered App Engine section with your custom App Engine section without having to go through a customization. So, during your next People Tools upgrade, evaluate how you can use App Engine customization plugins to replace your AE customizations. And so, the point being is just that, customization review is an ongoing effort that needs to be, forefront in your mind. Okay, so, with our PUM strategy in place, customization footprint minimized, it's really time to reach, it's time to reach the holy grail of PeopleSoft application management, and that is automated testing. As you can imagine, can you imagine a world where you apply a PUM or a People Tools update, you go home for the evening, enjoy dinner with the family, play fetch with Sparky, get a great night's sleep, wake up to a report to show you that 93% of all your business processes are humming along after applying a People Tools update. I mean, just think how happy your users will be when you can cut their testing time for a PUM by about 50%. If you aren't using PTF, you're really missing a fantastic cost savings opportunity. For one, the tool is free, relatively easy to install and set up, and all your human capital that's spent on building your library of test scripts and test cases is reusable with each upgrade pass. More than any other feature, we see clients start out with really good intentions of using PTF. They build a few test scripts, and then ultimately they abandon the effort. And this isn't because the tool didn't work or the value isn't realized. It's just that it falls behind from a prioritization standpoint. So I can't encourage you enough to set aside some capital dollars for truly building out and embracing PTF as part of your application management cycle. We used to advise our clients to kind of start small with PTF, give it a try, build a few test cases, and then slowly incorporate that as part of your PUM strategy. But we found that ultimately it just stopped. They built a few test cases, then it stopped. So we've since changed our tune because we see the value of the PTF. Our model is now go all in on PTF, build all the test scripts that you possibly can, make this a specific project and a specific initiative, not just something you're going to do on the side. I think you really can immediately see the value of the PeopleSoft test framework. So, let's just kind of recap. So we've been through the infrastructure. We built a solid infrastructure foundation that's deployed securely. We're using multi-factor authentication. It's available from our users through their mobile devices. You've enabled Fluid, Classic Plus. You've taken advantage of the many usability features at your disposal, such as pivot grids, work centers, branding, Elasticsearch. Really now your PeopleSoft system looks and feels like a modern system. You've reduced your technical debt by squeezing out all the customizations as possible, and you continue to evaluate those that can be eliminated on an ongoing basis. You've adopted a recurring update cycle, and your users are appraised and informed of when those updates will be happening. And lastly, you've reduced the PUM update project durations by about 50% through the use of automated testing. And suddenly you take a look back at your PeopleSoft system, which the sales rep just said was no longer viable, it's a dead system, and it suddenly looks and acts and functions much like a SaaS-based system. You've got embedded analytics, you've got a mobile experience, you've got continual updates, although semi-automatic versus vendor supported, but you're pretty darn close. And it's amazing to think of that when, considering the system was originally built in the 1980s. So something we often get pushback from our clients when we talk about the initiatives we discussed today is that, CapEx dollars are tight. There's often limited budget for consulting resources. Oftentimes internal teams can be hesitant to adopt new skills or test out a new feature. So when we come at this, we challenge our customers with what we call the 10-4-5 principle. And this means if you're evaluating moving from PeopleSoft to a SaaS-based system, take 10% of your estimated spend for that implementation. These implementations can run between $3 and $8 million, depending on the features and functionality you're going to deploy. So take 10% of that. Invest this in modernizing your PeopleSoft system, and this will yield 5 years of PeopleSoft longevity. So 10% for 5 years of PeopleSoft longevity. But it really is important to focus on where your investments are going to be spent as it relates to PeopleSoft. Really, you need to focus on activities that have the most ROI. And so, for example, spending your time on converting a customization to a smart customization one time instead of reapplying that same customization with every PUM update, or invest in building an automated test scripts once that can be used again and again and again. If you think of your PeopleSoft system as a modern and SaaS-like application, and apply the same principles to infrastructure, user experience, application management as a SaaS vendor does, you'll quickly realize that the system can keep up and even provide value for your business in years to come. As we know, PeopleSoft and Oracle have issued a rolling 10-year support for PeopleSoft. PeopleSoft's not going away. You continue to see the investment in the application with every PUM release, with every PeopleTools release. So it's time to continue with that investment in PeopleSoft. So, thank you for your time today. Again, my name is Rob Townsend. I encourage any feedback or comments you may have on this. I would certainly, if you have any, I know, we covered a lot of info, so if there's any specific topics you want to drill into and discuss one-on-one basis, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is there on the screen. My phone number is there on the screen. If you have any interest in talking about PeopleSoft as a service and how we can help you manage your PeopleSoft environment efficiently, we'd certainly like to talk about that. Thanks everybody for your time. I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, for your session today. I'd like to encourage everyone to go learn more about MoTown Group by visiting their website. As you can see there, MoTownGroup.com. Every presenter here was handpicked by us, so we know you'll benefit from learning more about them and how you can innovate PeopleSoft. I do see we have a handful of questions here. Don't worry, we'll make sure that we get those over to Rob so he can follow up with you one-on-one. And last, I'd like to mention that future PeopleSoft Innovation Summits are currently being planned, and we'll be sending out a survey on Friday. So we'd really appreciate your feedback there for this week's event. We also encourage you to follow Appsian on LinkedIn and Twitter so you can be the first to learn about these future events. And of course, you can find us at www.appsian.com. Fluid Zero to Hero in 60 Minutes with Jim Marion is up next, and we'll see you again in just a few minutes. Thanks again, Rob.
Thank you.